We power dreams. We power life. But there's one power we all have. The power to make a difference. The power to vote. Entergy, the power of people.
Good evening and welcome to Louisiana's Public Square. I'm Beth Courtney.
And I'm Charles Zewe.
We'd like to welcome you tonight to this program that marks the first in a year-long series of programs designed to stimulate discussion of vital issues confronting Louisiana. We've invited average citizens to join us in the Public Square. They'll discuss tonight's topic and then have the opportunity to ask questions of the governor of the state of Louisiana. Tonight, we tackle economic development. Just about every public opinion poll taken during the last 8 years in Louisiana has listed the economy and jobs at or near the top of the list of important issues facing the state. Louisiana is blessed with vast natural resources. It straddles the greatest river in North America and is home to 5 of the top 12 ports in the United States. Louisiana's workers are considered to be among the most productive in the nation, but there are problems which continue to cause concern. This brief background story uses information from the Public Affairs Research Council and the Council for a Better Louisiana to help frame the discussion. The economy and jobs are among the greatest concerns of Louisiana citizens, and with good reason. Despite its geographic good fortune, a willing workforce, and some recent progress, Louisiana continues to languish at the bottom of many economic, education, and quality of life rankings. The second lowest job growth in the South between 1991 and 2001. The only state in the South to see a reduction in its gross state product between 1996 and 2000. The only state in the South to suffer a net loss of population due to outmigration. How can Louisiana raise itself to the upper tier of states in these important areas? What are the major impediments holding back our economic development, and what role can government play to increase prosperity for all Louisianians?
Businesses are interested in finding a place where there's a stable workforce, where there's a good tax structure, where there's a good quality of life, where they have an infrastructure that is conducive to getting their product to market.
Opinions vary as to what are the most important issues, but these 4 are often mentioned as the most pressing: taxes, infrastructure, education, and negative perceptions of the state. Louisiana ranks 41st in the Tax Foundation's State Business Climate Index. That index measures the impact on business of 5 indicators, including individual, corporate, and sales taxes.
We still have a problem with the property tax situation in the state of Louisiana. It's basically an 85 to 90% tax on business.
In spite of Louisiana's nearly automatic granting of the 10-year industrial property tax exemption, the Public Affairs Research Council points to one study that ranked Louisiana 10th in the nation in the share of total state and local taxes paid by business.
The 2 areas that were most out of step, taxing sales tax on machinery and manufacturing equipment, as well as including debt and money that you borrow and being taxed on that, very much out of step with the rest of the South and the rest of the country. Those taxes now will be phased out over a 6-year period of time.
Such revamping of tax laws should place Louisiana on a more competitive footing for attracting new investments and keeping existing businesses here.
You can bring goods in through the Mississippi River and carry them all the way all the way north, right up through the heartland of this country. Or you can take stuff from the heartland of this country and take it all the way to any other spot in the world. And here we sit right at the mouth of the river.
Logistics and transportation are the historic keystones of Louisiana's very existence. In a real sense, they are why we're here. About 1 out of every 8 Louisiana workers is directly involved in this core cluster of industries. Infrastructures are costly to maintain and update. In a recent report, the nonprofit Road Information Program claimed that traffic congestion and poorly maintained roads and bridges threaten Louisiana's status as a major gateway for domestic and international commerce. Louisiana is ranked in the bottom 5th nationally in state investment in highways, roads, and bridges.
The lack of attention to our infrastructure, critical infrastructure in the state, is a major problem. And unfortunately, we continue to, I think, sort of put it off until next year, until next year, until next year.
You can't have good business growth. You can't have a good business climate. You can't have economic development unless you've got a quality education system that supports the growth, the economic growth. Now, what do I mean by that? Education has to provide a workforce.
Unfortunately, with a few notable exceptions, when the subject is education, Louisiana's grades are at the bottom of the class. Dropout rates as high as 33% do not bode well in an economy that will need workers with 2-year associate degrees or advanced training to fill 65% of the available jobs.
Training is a very, very big issue, and it's something that I think our state needs to do a lot better job of getting a handle on the dollars that are already existing for funding. There's hundreds of millions of dollars that come into Louisiana either through state-generated sources, federal sources, or what have you.
Higher education drives innovation and job creation in a number of southern states. Louisiana is making moves to marshal the economic potential of universities by parlaying highly technical campus expertise and resources into knowledge-based commercial spin-off companies. Environmental concerns that inspired the infamous Cancer Alley label still linger, in spite of contradictory statistics and industry efforts to lower toxic emissions. Louisiana has a reputation for colorful politics, but a legacy of public corruption does not create a good climate for economic development.
I think unfairly we're still having to live with this image of corruption from past years in this state. Some of it from decades and decades ago, but that's something that we do have to overcome, and I think we can overcome.
Overcoming negative images of the state will be a difficult, ongoing process. Efforts such as governmental ethics reform may help to create a more favorable perception of Louisiana over time. In the end, economic development will require making hard choices and maintaining a commitment to achieve the goals we set for ourselves.
That's the broad overview. Our discussion now will be divided into two parts. First, the people gathered here will talk about their own attitudes about economic development and what kind of job the state is doing in attracting business and industry. Then we'll break and bring in Governor Kathleen Blanco to take questions directly from our participants here. Before we begin, however, a few quick words about the people gathered here in the studio with us. They were scientifically selected using random digit dialing of phone numbers in the Baton Rouge metropolitan area. After agreeing to take part in our program, participants were asked a series of questions about their attitudes on economic development. We also asked them questions about themselves. From that data, we think you should know that, for instance, our participants are mostly married. They are middle to upper income wage earners making between $40,000 and $100,000 a year. Just under half have a bachelor's or associate's degree. 46% say they are Democrats, 27% Republicans, with 19% claiming that they're independents. In addition, 2/3 of our participants see themselves as moderate to very conservative on economic issues. One of the things that stood out to me in looking at the answers to the questions that you were asked before you came here was the fact that there is a big mistrust of who state government really represents. 61% of you said it represents big interest, not the interest of everybody. Let's start by talking about that. In Louisiana, what do you think about who state government really represents? Richard?
I think state government does represent a lot of interest groups, fundamentally. I see that in ways big and small. One of the questions I posed in talking with my colleague Mike before we came in here was that what powerful political interest kept Interstate 49 from being completed through Alexandria for all those years? Because you had to get off the interstate, so while you were there, you may as well buy gasoline, you may as well eat some food. I think there was a powerful political interest at work there that kept I-49, and that's a minor example, okay? It's a
but
minor
that's stuck
example,
in your craw.
But it's one that I lived through, and I think it's one of many.
How about it, Mike? How does it bother you? What do you think? The state represents big interests, like big businesses, or you really think they have you in mind?
I think pretty big business. I see a lot in the news lately about the new fish store, the fish shop, and what is it?
The Bass Pro Shop.
The Bass Pro Shop, and I think that the government's really trying to bend over to get them to move in. And I don't really know what it's about, but.
Well, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with the government doing that sort of thing? Anybody?
Well, first of all, I don't think there's anything wrong with encouraging businesses to be built here, but unlike the deal with the Saints where we actually pay them money to stay here, I think that was a bad deal for the state. Give them tax incentives, you know, where it's money that we're just not collecting from them, but it's a benefit to them. It's money they don't have to pay to keep them here. Incentives. That's the important thing.
Well, let's talk about that, because in our poll, Republicans mostly favored giving businesses tax incentives. Democrats favored spending more in education. But you brought up the Saints. Let's talk about the Saints, since that's a hot issue in the state, particularly in the New Orleans area.
Okay.
What about the whole idea of giving tax incentives or giving money right out of the state general fund or elsewhere in the general fund? Anybody have a problem with that other than Lisa?
No, I don't have any particular problem with it. I think that taxation and a favorable regulatory environment are necessary for economic development. But another question I'll ask is, how are we going to win the race to the bottom? I mean, no matter what we do in that respect, and I agree that things need to be done and those are necessary conditions, but no matter what we do in that respect, there's always going to be someone who can do better, if not another state, a lesser developed country. I think, for me, education is a burning issue, and that we can address a lot of other issues through acts of the legislature and the governor, but I think education is going to be one that's going to take a generation to address and correct.
Mary, you're nodding your head.
Oh, I just believe it really starts with education. A lot of our students get to 12th grade, and they don't go any further because of this exit test. And education is the main thing, and that's what they need to strive on, just education.
Well, again, this is a Baton Rouge audience, but what about giving a team like the Saints state money to stay here? It's a business. It generates tax revenues. What about
but it's not benefiting everybody. It's not benefiting everybody. You have to look on everything. You have to put it on the line and look and see where it's benefiting, not just one area.
Well, it directly benefits New Orleans' economy. That's no doubt. But overall, I mean, it's a sense of pride for the state of Louisiana if you have a team, a sports team that does well, makes it to the playoffs, and you generate that community pride throughout the state from that. However, I think it's a mistake to just take money, tax dollars that we pay, and just give it to them. Say, here, please stay here, because all of a sudden, all the economic impact that they've brought by being here is gone, because you paid them more than what they've generated.
I'm sure the governor's going to have. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think that's the big issue. We're shoveling out money to the Saints. Do they actually contribute that much? She mentioned if they make the playoffs, well, the Saints have sort of not held up their side of the deal very well.
But how about the larger issue, though? Other states give all sorts of incentives to industries to locate. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think the idea of giving incentives makes sense, but I think you have to think very carefully about who you give incentives to and what you get back. As we're saying, in the Bass Shop, for example, I mean, is that something that does anything but drive small businesses out of business? I mean, I don't see that as a real important economic development issue, and yet we're giving them a whole lot of money to come here.
Well, what would you want to see? I mean, what would you believe would be a good thing the state should spend either its flat-out tax dollars or tax incentives on?
Well, I do agree about education. I have to say, I think the state ought to spend a lot of money on education all through, from the pre-K all the way through the university level, to raise the whole level of education in the state, because I believe, as other people have said, that it does start there. But I do also believe that trying to bring in businesses, I think information technology type of businesses are good businesses to try to bring in, and then can dovetail with the university and people. If we train people at the university, one of our problems is we train people and they leave because there aren't the jobs here. So we need to sort of attract both ends. We need to train people, but attract the businesses that will then employ those people so that they can stay here and build the business.
You bring up another, yes ma'am, Connie.
But with education, you can't just continually throw money at it.
That is the same thing.
Yeah, has been shown that it doesn't really do anything. There's accountability. There are teachers here in supposedly good schools, and I'm not a native Louisianian. I've lived in other places and never had to go to private schools until we moved down here. And some of these private schools were supposed to be very good, and you're paying good money for them, and they're really not up to par necessarily.
But there's not been any accountability for school teachers.
No, they're not. And they work hard. I know they work
they
hard.
do too. Right.
Well, what would you like to see? I mean, what kind of accountability would satisfy?
Well, any accountability, anything you work in, you have to be tested occasionally, you know.
Gene, you've been
in government, even.
You've been taking it all in. I've seen you wrinkle your forehead a couple of times on some of these issues. What about it?
If you want to go with education, you've got to remember that East Baton Rouge Parish is kind of a unique situation going through that 50-year lawsuit. Now, you go over to Livingston Parish, our next door neighbor, they've got a real good school system. Understand that they got 46 openings over there for school teachers, and they had 400 applicants. Step right across the line, Ascension Parish, they've got a good school system. So we've got to overcome our problem with the DSEG suit.
But overall, Louisiana in education is not up to where they should be, I think.
Well, let's talk about jobs, because that's what the bottom line here is, that good education, tax incentives, whatever, it all comes down to jobs. People, is everybody here employed?
Yes. Retired.
Retired. You're lucky. But how about your kids? Some of you have children. I mean, are they here or they've left the state? Or?
I have some that have left. My oldest daughter left with her husband, but my youngest daughter is still here, and her husband work here.
I've got a young one who's got 2 kids, and he's worried about living in East Baton Rouge Parish because of the school systems, and he's looking at Florida, and well, I told him he can go, but the kids have to stay.
From here, Florida and Texas, because I've got not kids, but friends that have recently moved to either Florida or Texas, and it's.
Let's hear from some of the people who haven't spoken so far. Robert?
I'm actually under the top scholarship program right now at LSU, so I think that's really an important program. I'm glad Governor Foster started that. That's definitely kept me in the state so far. And then once again, like you were saying, the problem is then after I get out of school, am I going to be able to get a job here? And I'm definitely more inclined to stay in the state now that I've had, you know, my education paid for. And, you know, you feel a slight debt of gratitude because of the fact that you did receive a free college education. But that is an issue, and hopefully Governor Blanco is going to begin to tackle that a little more by removing some of the disincentives for businesses being in the state.
What year are you in?
I'm going to be a senior.
So you're coming right down to decision time. You think you'll stay, or are you going to go?
Job market, right? It all comes down to the money.
In fact, there's a new study. 65.5% of all Louisiana college graduates between 1995 and 2000, based on the census, left. 65.5 per 1,000 of population left Louisiana. Carl, what do you think of all of that?
Well, can I go back to the earlier topic about incentives to attract business? We've done, over the years, we've done a good bit of this, and quite frankly, we've got more failures than we've got successes. I quite frankly have a problem with giving a large supermarket chain the faith of the state government for their bonds to build when you've got Sally's snack stand next door that didn't get any of this extra gratis. So
you're shaking your head. You agree?
Yes, I do.
Why?
Totally. I think it should, come down to, trying to be fair to everybody. Like he said, you got Sally's snack shop on the side that's not getting any of this, and it's just not right.
Burke, you've been taking it all in?
Well, I think that, people mention education and tax incentives, but I think that, before any of that, the infrastructure of the state, like we saw in the film, has to be brought up to par, because no business, regardless of how sweet a tax incentive you offer them, or you could have the best schools in the country, and if they don't have the infrastructure for their business, they're not going to move here.
Okay, this young man needs a job. He's going to need a job in about a year, right? What would you do? What needs to be done? What do you want to know from the governor about what needs to be done? What do you want to see the state do?
The state needs to get some business into it so that these kids can have jobs. Because I have a cousin, he just graduated from LSU in chemical engineering. He's been working at Walmart for the last year. And I'm like, you went to school 6 years to work at Walmart, and we're looking for him to have a great life, but him and his wife can't have it. Not off of Walmart.
Not here.
Not here.
That's exactly right.
He has to
He'll
leave.
have to leave here. He'll have to leave his family, you know, and take his immediate family with him and relocate in order to work, to eat. Yeah. Exactly.
Does that get you upset?
Yes, I'm very upset because my baby sister had to leave here years ago, and she would like nothing more than to be here.
I have another cousin, a co-worker, worked with me for about 5 years. They moved to Iowa, and her son is 12, and they went to the school, and she went in and she said, "Oh, it was a beautiful school, brand new," she thought. When the orientation was over, she went to the principal and she says, "Well, how old is this school, 4 or 5 years?" She says, "No, it's 20 years old." She says, "Well, gosh, how did you manage to keep it looking?" He says, "Oh, $25,000, $50,000 a year we put in this school every time it closes to bring it back up to par." So it's not that, you know, all kids going to do some vandalizing to your school, but you got to have some in there that's going to take care of that situation so that you can pull these people to your area.
Buildings don't maintain themselves.
Vernon, we haven't heard from you.
Well, I think they need some kind of a different way to train people, because I had to send my son out of state to get him trained. I mean, he went to a mechanic school, diesel mechanic, and there was nothing around here that he could go to. So we sent him to Nashville, and this great amount of money was spent that I had to pay was spent in Tennessee, you know, where it could have been spent here if they would have had some kind of training school where he could go to. And then my daughter, she moved to Georgia because there was no work over here for her. She works with the insurance companies, billing doctors and stuff like this. So, you know, I'm about like everybody else. Everybody's got somebody that had to leave for some reason that could have been.
And that hurts you, right?
Oh, yeah, I don't get to see them once, twice a year because I have to work, you know, my wife works.
Let me ask you, you saw pictures of Edwin Edwards come up there. And Louisiana, believe it or not, now ranks 3rd nationally as the most corrupt state based on a study of public officials who've been convicted of crimes. What about that image of corruptions? Do y'all think it's better now?
I think it's a little better.
No.
You know, but we still have that reputation of being a nice place to visit, but not a good place to bring your business.
I will give you an example, and it goes also to infrastructure. The neighborhood where I live is south of LSU. We've been here about 6 years. In that 6 years, I have seen at least 1,000, if not more, new living units spring up. One of the last ones I actually went to talk to the council along with a lot of my neighbors to protest it because they have not done anything, they being our government here in Baton Rouge, to improve the roads or the sewer systems, and they're just piling things on.
So you're saying what? That somebody's on the take here?
Oh, I'm sorry.
When
I'm sorry. When I went to the council, so many people testified before the council, and one of the councilmen even had done all the numbers, and he was supporting our assertion that there was going to be a lot of problems with the traffic. And it was like, okay, you've had your say, but it's a foregone conclusion that this is going in. And it felt like somebody's pocket was getting lined.
I heard a bunch of the rest of you say, no, things aren't better. Some of you said yes. What about it?
I think it's getting better.
Why? What makes you believe that?
Governor Foster was a pretty upright man. People generally trusted him, whether or not they agreed with all his political, views. I think he was a pretty honest, moral man, had some integrity. I think Governor Blanco is an honest woman. I think both of them were real concerned with bringing integrity into the state, bringing a better image of integrity forward.
I think it is getting better. I mean, it takes time. People are going to label you, and we'll probably be labeled a corrupt state because of our history for quite a while. But, the reality of the situation, the actions kind of will speak louder than our reputation. If we can get them here, and there is a good climate, and they can grow, that will be the difference. I mean, it's not going to matter what the reputation is. And I just want to say one thing about, you went to the council and talking about the traffic and the sewer. They are trying to do things better. I have to deal with this all the time. whenever we have to submit for projects for review, we have to do a traffic impact study. We have to do a sewage impact study. So you have to show them that how your project's going to affect.
I understand, but the Connie's perception is that that the fix is in. Anybody else?
Well, let me add it. I think that I'll put in a pitch for Mayor Nagin in New Orleans. I think he's doing a very good job, but I don't think he's getting the support. He's taking heat for trying to clean up New Orleans, because some of the things he's doing or some of the things that have occurred since he's been are not politically correct. I mean, it's not popular to go after Mark Morial in New Orleans, but if Morial deserves to be investigated, then he should be investigated, and if he's guilty, then he needs to be in court. But I think Mayor Nagin has done a very good job of trying to clean up New Orleans. But again, he's catching a lot of heat for it.
Thank you, Richard. That, believe it or not, wraps up a very quick first segment here tonight. When we return, we'll take a short break, and then we'll come back and be joined by Governor Blanco. Back on Louisiana Public Square now, we're joined by Governor Kathleen Blanco. Governor, thank you and welcome to our discussion.
Well, you're welcome.
We have 10 of the participants gathered around the table with us, and Mary has the first question for the governor.
Governor Blanco, last week at our Congress of Christian Education that was at Reverend Charles Zewe church, you talked about the children and their education and the ways that you wanted to help. And you kind of elaborated on that, and I would just like to know, what can you do as our governor, along with the state representatives and whatnot, to kind of substantiate some kind of point in there with that exit test? Because a lot of our students get to the exit test and they fail it and they drop out. They can't get their high school diploma and they can't go any further.
Well, Mary, I know that's a very hard thing for a lot of young people to experience. What we're trying to do with the exit test is make sure that they have acquired basic skills. And I think one of the things that can happen is to make students more testing friendly, make them more comfortable taking a test, because sometimes we know that some kids actually know the material but they get a little choked up. And so a lot of schools are helping students learn how to take that kind of test, and they do a little bit more of it. That would be one way. The other thing is that kids do have several chances to pass the exit test. And while it's still very, very hard, it's an indicator that somehow the school hasn't given them enough knowledge, just enough to carry them through that last phase. And we don't want them to give up. We want them to stay and to get back into the system and get the foundation that they need. If they don't have that basic foundation, they're not going to be able to succeed as they move through the next years in any kind of job or in any further education. So those are the real concerns. And Louisiana's moving forward. One of the big problems, and I don't want to take too much time just on this question, but one of the big problems is that the National No Child Left Behind Act is going to push even harder on our schools, on our kids, and on our faculties. And they're going to be asked to do even more than they're doing now. So we have to keep remembering that. We're trying to give kids the strength and the tools they need.
Does that answer your question, Mary? Yes. Does that satisfy you?
Yes.
You think the state will be doing enough?
Right.
Who else?
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to follow up a little bit on education, on a sort of a different end of education. I believe that having a really strong university, a world-class university, is a real important engine of economic development. And so I just wondered if you can talk a little bit about how you can help LSU be a better university and draw in more business, more highly trained professors, et cetera.
Well, certainly the Baton Rouge region, and I know all of you are from the Baton Rouge area, has two very significant universities, Southern University as well as LSU. LSU is recognized across the state as being our #1 university. we're dependent on this university for producing the graduate students in the master's and the PhD programs. That will differentiate whether we're going to be recognized nationally or not. And I'm certainly wanting to work with the folks at LSU, with the administration, to help redirect some of the energies and some of the monies. I think one of the problems in the past is that the formula has been driven toward adding bodies so that you can generate money to run the campus. In the future, the money should be really directed toward excellence and toward helping them to strengthen their graduate programs. When you do that, then you will become recognized nationally as one of the leading research institutions, and you'll truly be a flagship university in the fullest sense of the word.
Do you feel like that answers your question, or did you want to go with Connie?
I wanted to kind of piggyback on that. What about the notion of Louisiana having so many four-year universities and not really having one school in particular that, you know, those universities, if you will, can kind of draw off the monetary support and the academic support versus having one, as you say, flagship university. I'm not from this state, and so it's kind of interesting to me to see this.
Well, in many states, you have more than one very strong university, and they, you know, and I guess it could be said that they're competing for dollars too.
But they're usually within a system.
Right.
One system.
Well, in Louisiana, you know, we have to deal with certain political realities, you know, after all. And we are we're trying to actually, by increasing entrance standards, that also gives you status and standing, and it's filtering down, and it's creating the right kind of system. And you do pay more to a university for its graduate studies, or you should, and then the other universities who have less graduate programs would be focusing on undergraduate studies. That doesn't cost as much, but the key thing that we've developed now is the community college, where young people who have not had a strong enough high school experience to carry them into the universities now with the new standards will be able to strengthen their basic foundation, and they can choose technical or community college and then transfer into the universities.
One of our future programs will be devoted entirely to education, so we don't want to get too far off the track in terms of jobs. Richard?
Yeah, Governor, I have my own ideas about what kind of businesses Louisiana should be trying to bring to the state for the long-term benefit of the state and its people, but I'd like to hear your views on what industries you think you would like to attract.
Well, I think that we need to be very diversified. One of the areas of high-paying jobs that can hire a lot of people with a lot of different skill sets is manufacturing. Now, that is the challenge area for the United States because we've lost a tremendous amount of manufacturing overseas. But there's a renewed interest. As a matter of fact, we can, you know, we see states and Louisiana as well working internationally to bring manufacturers here, and there's kind of this reverse thing happening that we haven't seen in many, many years. I think that the information technology jobs, any kind of technology, the biotechnologies, the medical area is a very strong area. Those areas are where quality jobs are created. And I will tell you that I'll be willing to work to bring any kind of business in that I consider a quality job, where you have a decent salary with benefits, where you have health insurance coverage, you know, and you have good retirement programs. That's not what young people normally look at first, but health insurance certainly is something that is critical. That's why we have so much weight on our public hospital system, because so few people have insurance and so few of our working people have health insurance, and that's a big concern.
Does that answer your question, Richard?
Yes, it does, and I'm glad you said manufacturing. I would add to that any heavy industrial concern. Let's face it, it's difficult to recruit those type of industries. It's difficult to get them located and established because of public opposition, not in my backyard, the regulatory and environmental hurdles, but once they're there, they tend to stay, they tend to expand, they provide high-paying jobs with good benefits, like you say, and I think that really will provide the long-term benefit for the state and its people, so I'm glad to hear you say that.
Thank you, Richard.
We've talked about a lot of the problems Louisiana has had in the past, and what I think things are improving, and I think you've done a good job in trying to focus the state toward economic development. But what can the state do to improve its position as far as the national arena and being more attractive to jobs from outside the state?
Well, I think in the national setting, one of the things that we have not done is positioned Louisiana as a good place to do business. And there are lots of reasons for that. But, I think that we can bring the messages of success to the national attention, by doing it in lots of different ways. Since, we don't have a huge budget yet, but I think we can do a little advertising, a little targeted advertising in business journals that talk about some of our successes and the good things that are going on in Louisiana. One of the things that I did recently was send out about 30,000 letters to CEOs both in Louisiana and outside of Louisiana, talking about the fact that we, in the special session, took the business taxes down on manufacturing, the sales taxes on manufacturing machinery and equipment, and the tax on corporate franchise debt. And we're going to be phasing that out. Now, truthfully, it's been a wonderful announcement to say that we erased them, off the books forever, but we just can't afford to do that. And, I really want to say that running a state budget is not any different than running a business's budget or a household budget. You do what you can, and you try not to put a shock into the system if you can avoid it. But we're going to be phasing those down, and I think that was a great message to send out. We've gotten 250 cards back. We put response cards for more questions. We've gotten 250 cards back. We got like 50 letters, or 50 to 75 letters so far. They still are coming in. We've gotten 50 phone calls roughly from people who are, this is the first time they've heard anything from Louisiana. And it was a direct communique. I went to Houston to the Offshore Technology Conference. They told me it had been 25 years since the governor had been. And they're still talking about it. I think there's still something left to be done with the oil industry. Some people threw it off the table and said, it's passé. Well, it's evolving, but there's still a lot of economic activity to be had there. So I'm willing to go anywhere to search out, in every nook and cranny, whatever's possible, whatever makes sense for Louisiana.
Bob, are you buying what the governor said?
I do. I was just wondering, are there any legal changes that you see that you've identified that would, in your programs for the future, to make Louisiana more attractive, away from business?
We've got our package of incentives that are very good, as compared to any other states. And in fact, with certain conditions, we can have tax equalization. So that cannot be an excuse for losing an opportunity. If a business is going to bring jobs into Louisiana and they've got a verified opportunity in another state, we can match any other state's tax package. So I think we've got our incentives in a row. We've got our taxes that are phasing off the books, so we're showing good faith to the business community that we're actually interested in supporting businesses in many ways. And the last piece of it that I'm working on this year is the ethics package. Our bad politics has given us a black eye over the years, and I think it's really important for us to make some very overt statements saying that we care about our ethical well-being, and that we're willing to reveal, more and more about how politics works in the Louisiana state government.
Governor, one of the things I'm sure you saw when you were watching earlier our discussion was, it really touched a nerve among everybody gathered here, was the fact of young people leaving Louisiana. You heard a lot about that during the campaign. We have a young man who's a senior at LSU right here, Robert. What do you need to hear from the governor that would encourage you to know that you're going to have a good job to go to when you get that diploma at LSU? What do you need to hear from the governor?
Well, I mean, she can only do so much, right? And I feel like she's doing what she can from what I'm hearing so far. I think TOPS is good in a lot of ways. Like, aside from the fact, even if some of the students, the statistic you quoted earlier, you said a high percentage of students do still leave the state. But I think a lot of the students that leave the state would be interested in coming back. What I was going to say was, my question for you was going to be concerning the state culture. I really feel like that's one of this state's strongest points, because we have such an individual culture, so different from the rest of the other states, musically, artistically, cuisine-wise. I'm actually a musician. I play in a local band called Tritonic, and we're playing here in the city now. So that's obviously something that's of interest to me. So what I was going to ask is, what could we do to continue to encourage arts, music, and culture, and sell that and market it to other people in other states?
Well, I worked on that for 8 years as Lieutenant Governor, marketing the arts. Louisiana does have this tremendously interesting culture, and it's a very compelling culture as well. And our gifts and talents are vast in the creative arts, and I do want to continue to build on that. We all know I raised 6 children. That's my husband and I had a very large family, and I know it's very normal, though, for a lot of young people to leave Louisiana or to leave their home states. They want to go explore. It's very natural for young people to think the grass is greener somewhere else. And I actually don't have a big problem with that. I think that's not a bad thing necessarily, because I think, we also receive people from out of state, as I think I heard Connie say.
True.
And but the point is that you're right. At some point in time, that young person will likely want to come home. It's that key moment. Will we have something for them to do, a good job waiting at that juncture? And that's our work. That's the work we have cut out for us. Now, I've taken that as my charge, because what I want to try to do is create a state of opportunity for our children to be able to come home. And I, too, have a child currently living very far away in Minnesota. And a couple of other of my children have been in and out of the state. Right now they're in. I don't know if they'll stay in or eventually have to leave as well. But, it's a big challenge, and we just have to do all the things we've been talking about to try to lift Louisiana. And I think the other big thing is that Louisiana people need to start talking in positives about the good things that they know. I think we beat ourselves up enough. I think it's time for us to quit taking the beating and quit giving ourselves the beating and start looking at the positives and moving on, and just brag a little bit about anything good to anybody out of state. And a lot of it is mind over matter, while we're working hard to create the foundation to have real opportunity.
Burke had a question, Governor.
Governor Blanco, I wanted to know, my question deals with the infrastructure. And a few months ago, we heard a lot in the press about the possibility of the massive cargo airport between Baton Rouge and New Orleans being built. And I wanted to know, where is that plan in the works? I mean, what sort of hurdles are in the way of that happening? And also, what kind of time frame are we looking at with that program?
There's been a lot of work, and there's a lot of interest in trying to get private partners to come in and invest. The state obviously doesn't have enough money to do that kind of project by itself. The state is interested in continuing to foster that project, though. I think it bodes well for future opportunities. And I've inherited a very difficult task. This is not an excuse. I just want you to know this is a very depressing reality. When I came into office, I had a $500 million shortfall in the operating budget. And in the capital outlay, where you make these kinds of investments, we have limits on how much we can borrow each year to build projects out. And I've got an excess of $177 million over the $250+ million that we're borrowing. And so it's going to take a couple of years to move these committed projects out, and before we can, put strong investment in new projects. But there is some continuation money invested in that airport project that will keep it alive and keep it moving. It might not be enough, but it's a good faith amount to keep it going while they continue to work. And there are studies that have to be done, and they'll be doing some of their studies, and we'll try to get as much money as we can toward keeping it alive.
So it's still a very high priority, or how would you rank it in?
It's a strong priority. I don't know if you want to know the detail of this, but what we had to do was identify projects that were in construction. It's very expensive if you stop a project when it's in construction. You waste a lot of money. And so we've identified those projects that are in construction, and we've even asked those if they can wait a year or two to get all of them, if we can divide the money between 1 year and 2 years so we can add more in. It's still a good priority, let me tell you. We're not abandoning it.
Gene, you have a question.
Governor, I read where the budget is over $17 billion, and that's a lot of money to take from. This has to be taken from business and taxpayers. And I wonder if state government is too big, because last year I read one of the candidates said that the state of Florida has 20,000 more people. No, they have 10 million more people, and Louisiana has 20,000 more employees. It just seems odd to me.
I'm not sure, about the state of Florida. I haven't really looked at their statistics. I do know that we stand uniquely in some respects by having a state run public hospital system that no other state really has. So we've got lots and lots of employees there, and that kind of will differentiate us. But in any event, the state of Florida still has to pay for indigent health care, whether they do it directly through state employees or indirectly through the existing hospital structure. We do probably have too many employees, and it was a conversation that I had today trying to figure out a way to perhaps pare down some of that, and it's a challenge that I think every governor who's ever existed has looked into and has thought about trying to find ways to work smarter, work better, without just wearing our people out.
Lisa, you had a question.
Actually, yeah, I'm going to kind of tail into that same area on state workers. Part of the problem, again, is the perception of the state of Louisiana, and I think that begins with basically in our own backyard and the state workers. There's a climate where a department gets a budget every year, and if they don't spend that budget, the next year they don't get the money. So they're penalized if they don't spend all the money. So at the end of the year, they're wasting money just to get it spent so they'll get it again next year. What can you do specifically in your administration to try to clean up our own backyard?
Well, that's true to a point. I think in certain categories, if they haven't used up the money that they intended to buy computers with, they'll go out and spend that money at the very last. Sometimes the departments are doing it in self-defense because we've seen a history of mid-year budget cuts, and then if they spend it too early, then they don't have enough money to finish the year out too. So some of it's a little planning, by people who have been burned a few times.
And then there's no reward for being efficient as a department, and there's penalties for being efficient because you don't get it the next year if you need it. And so again, some of it may be warranted, but some of it is just let's spend it. It's a waste of
But
time.
how does that impact job attraction and business development?
Just again, the climate. It's hard being a taxpayer working and seeing, state workers that don't have to work as hard as we have to work. You have that impression of a state worker. Not all of them are that way, believe me, I know. My family, I have friends and family that do that. But you have some that are overworked and do more than they should have to, and then some that don't do anything. They do just the bare minimum to get by, because it's very difficult to fire a state worker, and that's why you have this overgrown state government.
Well, there are perceptions like that, and I think each state worker needs to think about that and get the message out. I know that there are thousands of extremely hard-working state workers, just as you identified. That's really true. And then, you know, there are some whose jobs are a lot easier or who aren't as attentive. But I think the state workers sometimes carry a heavy burden. There's actually a lot more accountability in state government in certain ways that business doesn't have to account for, and the magnifying lens is on them, and that's why it's important for state workers to always be very conscious of how they approach their own work and how they talk about their work as well.
Well, Governor, to your immediate left, we have a state worker right there.
And I appreciate the kind words. On behalf of everyone in the Department of Transportation.
Well, what's your question, Carl? What do you want to ask the governor?
I have an easy one. My daughter lives in Dallas. She's one of 2 children. They both left the state. One has returned. I was at her house when she applied for a business license in Texas. She did it on the web as a historically underutilized business hub. She did it, and like 10 minutes later, the license came back, not only from Texas, but it also lit up 14 other states and the combine. I don't think we have that capability here, and it's something we probably desperately need.
That's
do we have it?
That's what I call working smarter, and that's where Louisiana has to go, and that's part of our goal, is to try to take our processes and make them work easier for our citizenry and for people who want to start a new business. And I've also asked the departments that affect permitting processes, for instance, the Department of Environmental Quality, sometimes Wildlife and Fisheries, as well as the Department of Natural Resources. I've asked them to combine their efforts to bring their people together and take out any duplication in the processes of getting, you know, a business going or getting a permit out there so that business can take place. And I just want us to work smarter and more effectively and more efficiently. And they're doing this analysis as we speak, and you've got people from departments whose work is close, but it's not exactly the same, but they've never talked to each other. And so now they're talking to each other, and it's going to make it more sensible for the folks who are trying to get some business investment put into place in Louisiana's economy so that we can have a strong economy. And yes, we were studying a system much like that in New York, and they saved millions of dollars by doing it on the web and getting those efficiencies in place. And think of the frustration they saved, you know, from the general public. And so we are trying to make life a lot more sensible. We're also trying to link our young people with jobs, and you know, we have a website now where you can go and look at the various types of jobs. One thing that I have found, though, and maybe some of you could tell me why, businesses that have really good jobs do not usually advertise in the want ads in the newspapers. It's either word of mouth or headhunters or that kind of thing. So our young people who are graduating don't have a resource. That's why we're going to do something on the web. But why doesn't business in Louisiana with the really good jobs, you know, advertise for people who are looking for those jobs? Does
anybody know real quick?
They
We're running out of time.
nationwide. Yeah. They recruit nationwide. I mean, I would look at how many of the country's major employers are coming to LSU and to Southern and other universities to interview graduating seniors and graduate students for employment. When I was in college, I graduated from a major Big Ten university. Companies from all over the country came to interview engineering graduates in our department. And I know that I've talked to a number of these companies, and they say, well, we don't recruit at LSU. So, I mean, first thing is I'd look at see who's coming to LSU and find out for those who are not coming to LSU, why are they not coming to LSU or Southern or other schools to recruit?
Well, we'll have to find that out.
Robert, we convinced you to stay yet? The governor's sitting here. You can commit now.
Robert just wants a good job.
Sure. Listen, we've run out of time. Governor Blanco, thank you for being with us this evening. Thank everybody for taking part. We also want to especially thank the people at the Public Policy Research Lab of the Riley Center at LSU for helping to select our participants this evening. I thought they did a wonderful job of bringing people here who had a lot to say. And thank you for watching, and we'll be back with Beth, Courtney in just a moment. We'll have a few final thoughts. After our discussion broke up, we asked our participants again to take the same survey they took when we called them to recruit them to take part in the program in the first place. Had some interesting results, Beth.
Yes, indeed we did. We found that they were really more optimistic now after participating in a conversation, and I guess that was a little surprise for us.
It was. I think people who follow politics maybe a little too closely get a little cynical about what the public generally believes, but you know, there were some major shifts in the opinion of our participants. They're now much more optimistic as a result of taking part in our program and talking directly with the governor about they are much more confident that the state will do the right thing in terms of recruiting business and industry, and they're much more optimistic about state government in general.
Absolutely. I think about 40% came in saying they were not very confident at any efforts the state might have, and as they left, only 6% said they were not very confident. So, you know, absolutely, I think deliberative democracy, citizen involvement is a difficult thing sometimes, but it really reinforces the opinion that democracy works in this country.
Sounds like a cliche, but we proved it tonight that it really does work. And that wraps up our first Louisiana Public Square. Next month, we'll discuss property taxes and whether the time has come in Louisiana to fairly reassess all property.
You too can be part of Public Square. Go online at lpb.org and take the same survey our studio participants took tonight. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to having you with us again next month. For Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Beth Courtney. Good night.
We power hope. We power dreams. We power life. But there's one power we all have. The power to make a difference. The power to vote. Entergy, the power of people.